When you do a quick Google of what virtual reality art is, you don't actually get a Wikipedia page, which is quite interesting. I've been playing around with virtual reality art for about 5 years now, and it's been a very interesting journey. Lots of Googling, lots of searching, lots of creating the community and helping each other in learning and making VR art and VR experiences. Love to take a look at what VR art is with you today. So let's dive into the video. Whoop. Wikipedia talks about interactive art and also talks about virtual reality, but when you look at virtual reality as an art or as an art tool, we see common themes about VR art gives you the freedom to play around with colours, tools, and a near infinite canvas, drawing, painting, sketching, sculpting, no matter your preferred medium and skill level. We get a comment from Skillshare here saying that VR lets users explore simulated experiences. They're talking about a computer-generated environment and interactivity. So what is virtual reality art if there's no definition on Wikipedia? Well, luckily I've put one together for you, so I'd love to know what you think about it. Virtual reality art is art experienced in or produced with virtual reality tools or software, an art medium with virtually limitless possibilities. I'd love to know your 2 cents on that. There's no real definition at the moment, which is really exciting as an industry. It's a new creative medium. For a creative, there's a whole new tool to play around with. So I'm going to take you through, I've split it up into 3. So types of VR art. We'll have a look at VR creative concepts and also look at VR as a design tool. So when we take a look at virtual reality art, I find it handy to split it into 2. So we've got made in VR, which is where you're using virtual reality as a tool to create art, and then an in VR experience where someone is experiencing something in a VR headset, and I'll break it down a bit more for you. When we look at types of VR art and made in VR, there's quite a lot happening in this space. So we've got people using various headsets like the Oculus Quest, the Oculus Rift, the HTC Vive, and using it as more of an art tool. So think about Photoshop, but on your face, and also in 3 dimension. We can use various softwares like Medium and Google Tilt Brush, so you can create a digital art in a VR environment. And if you're creating in the environment, I class it as made in VR, so you could create an environment in VR, perhaps take a photo in that environment or take a video, export that, and then you've got some digital art that has been made in VR. When it comes to making stuff in VR, we have quite a few different areas that I'll go into. It's really interesting space if you're looking at 3D modeling, so drawing, sculpting, animating. You can use VR to create models, to animate them, to paint them, to color them. What's really cool in a 3D environment is that you can create, for example, like a diorama and have your space and create a puppet, which is you can almost pick up each hand and move it while you're in the 3D space. So it's almost like a 3D version of puppetry. You can create that, have the characters walk or do the motions, and then record it all within VR. And then you can export that as video or an animation to share. Also made in VR, we're looking at sculpting using, for example, Medium. There's quite a few different softwares that you can use to sculpt in VR, which is very fun. It's honestly such a fun space to get into because I find 3D modeling quite precise when you're looking at softwares like Blender, which is an awesome free software if you want to get into 3D modeling. But when we're talking about doing it in VR, it's almost a bit less clicky. You're not clicking around, modifying tiny little things, changing values of certain things. It's almost a bit more free to play around in the environment. So made in VR for sculptors, 3D modelers, games designers, pretty awesome environment to play around in. One software that I really love called Tavori is pretty crazy because you can export videos from there. It's almost like creating a 3D environment with animation and rendering it out as video or a 360 video. And people that have been involved in the 3D modeling space, they know the render times. So basically you're finalizing the 3D content they've put together, for example, a moving character or an object, and then you render it out really high quality. It can take hours or days. And playing around in Tvori is pretty awesome because it renders in real time. So if you've got a 1 minute video, it takes 1 minute to export, which is really powerful stuff. So we've got made in VR, so using VR as a tool, and then a VR experience. And this is where things get a bit more intense because you're creating experiences. You can create an animation or a movie or an interactive theatre that people are sitting in and experiencing through the VR headset. And when you're in VR, that's all you see. So the power, seeing myself in the camera, the power of immersion is real when you're in the VR headset. So as a creative, what incredible opportunity to grab someone's attention and take them on a journey of a story or a visual experience. And when you're talking about VR experiences, we can talk about VR animations. So we're storytelling, we're watching a character go on a journey, we're visiting places that we've never been, we are playing around with scale and perspective because it's a 360 environment that someone's experiencing. So you're thinking about all different ways that you can grab their attention or play around with creative processes in there. I put wow experiences in there because I couldn't really define them as like animation or a movie or interactive theatre, because sometimes it's just like you put someone in VR and it is wow, they're experiencing something, perhaps they're feeling drops of light falling from the sky, or they're witnessing something magical. So I'll talk about wow experiences. Also with VR, people playing around with more commercial experiences. So for example, you could have a brand and they're doing a brand activation at an event, and perhaps I've witnessed one where they were showing cars in this futuristic giant showroom in the sky, and you can look at the car model and change the colours or change the layout of the car, look in the car, sit in the car in a VR experience. Also, when we're talking commercial, we can talk more about doing architectural renderings. I don't know, not an architect, don't judge me, I don't know the terms. Creating interior design. So imagine a VR experience for maybe a paint company where you can go in, create your room, and then change the color or change the time of day and see how the light will play in the space. And then also in VR experience, we've got group spaces. So places like Alt Space, where you can gather and play Cards Against Humanity with some random people. Or you can have panel discussions, or I've even seen a game show created where you can participate and you've got a host, and these VR group spaces are very cool. It's not just VR chat where you're getting harassed by some random people. You've got the potential to have group experiences or lectures or discussions or meetups in VR. And then also we've got the gaming experiences, which are coming along. There is some incredible examples. For example, Alex Half-Life is probably one of the most out there experiences you can see in VR at the moment. They've got crazy physics. You can grab everything, you can shoot anything in the space. It is extremely high-end quality production. And then you also have just gaming for fun. You can play the role of a spy in I Expect You to Die game. You can play the role of throwing stuff around the office in Job. So there's some really cool gaming experience as well, which also obviously got so much creative juices flowing in them in terms of the design. So thinking a bit about the creative concepts in VR experience design, there's a whole lot of considerations in the design that you want to look at. And quite a few of them come from the film industry. So you've got, the idea of creating a story, creating a whole new world where it's got its own history or it's got its own lore. You've got screenwriting, you've got visual design, you've got storyboarding, concepts and flow and character design. You've got the art direction and cinematography. And you've also got the consideration of an audience as well, how they're going to experience it or what you kind of making them feel as they go through the journey. When we're looking at VR concepts in terms of in VR experiences, there's obviously a whole new dimension of consideration for your audience and how someone experiences that experience. So you've got VR theatre. I've seen VR movies where at film festivals they've created a space where everyone's got their own swivel chair, so they can have a look around in the VR without having to interrupt anyone else. So the idea of how people are seated, the idea of when you're in a VR experience, it's a 360-degree experience. So how do you know that the audience needs to look over here? Do you have maybe some sound or a flick of light that takes them there? Or someone walks across this space to where the next scene is happening? So the user movement and the line of sight was thinking about how we can basically guide a user or the audience member in the VR environment, where they're looking or what they're hearing, or making sure they don't miss any action, or maybe they're missing some action and might be intentional, who knows. And then obviously we've got equipment. So we've got different kinds of VR technology that are out there, different headsets that are out there. We've got different kinds of controllers. There's VR arcade experiences out there where you have like a huge plastic gun and you're walking around with it, so you get that sensory experience of holding a weapon but also seeing it in VR and then shooting zombies, which is pretty awesome. We've got the concepts of interactivity. Are they just watching a film and experiencing it, or can they interact? In one of my favourite VR experiences, Wolves in the Walls, the little girl actually hands you a camera and you can take it and you're looking for evidence around the room. So you're taking Polaroid pictures in the space and then you can hand her one of the Polaroids. I don't know if it's breaking the fourth wall. I'm not a film student, but that ability to kind of be part of the action and perhaps influence the outcome. You may have heard the term haptic feedback. The first example I saw of this was gloves, where I think they have some kind of gel or pressurized air in them. So when you go to pick up something in VR, you can actually feel a sensation on your hands. We've got people that are doing shooting games in arcades and you can feel the bullet if it hits you with like a haptic feedback vest. I think Tesla is working on some full body haptic feedback suit. So that's going to be a part of the technology involved in these VR experiences as well. Some VR headsets are standalone, some need a computer to work. So we need to learn about PCs and laptop uses with VR as well. That's part of the tech setup. And then also to be confirmed, who knows what's going to come out. Big companies are working on new technologies, so who knows what the future will hold for VR experiences. Also in the VR experiences, there's lots of assets involved. What I mean by that is there is a lot of stuff that we need to create a full VR experience. So, if we're making an animation experience or a movie that we're watching in the space, you've got a whole range of stuff that needs making: voice dialogue, sound effects, music. You've got the sound design there, and then you've also got the 3D models, the animation of the 3D models, the movement. You've got graphic design around the space. Something else on my list is logo design, because I've witnessed a couple of logos in VR and experiences now, and it's not just a logo. You're in a 360 environment, so a logo could be, as huge as a house, or it could turn and morph into something that starts the whole experience. You've got animation, you've got character design, you've got art style and concepts, drawing matte paintings, so what you see in the background of the space, or even the architectural style of the world. That would involve 3D models and content that are built to create in that space, or the drawings or the illustrations that's in the space, or even video content. You can create videos within these VR experiences, so you can mix and match different media. 360 sound design is an interesting one, because some of you may try a VR headset and you can hear someone. If they're here, you can hear them through this ear, for example, or if there's something going around, you can hear that. It's quite trippy, for lack of a better word, to be able to hear things in different spaces, and you turn your head and you can kind of hear the 360. I want to say omnidirectional sound. I don't know if that's right, but the 360 sound design is pretty awesome. And then also, if we're creating interactive games or movies, where's the play button? There's a whole load of design involved where you're doing the menu design or showing people how to navigate the space, or to, what buttons to press. That's a whole load of design involved to help people along the journey of knowing how to control it when they're in there. It sounds like they're trapped. You can't just take the headset off and you're not stuck in VR forever. So when we're looking at art that's been made in VR, there's a few different things there. Like you can use a virtual reality software like Tilt Brush, for example, or Medium to create an object. You can sculpt in there. You can draw almost like with clay. So it's almost like virtual reality ceramics, sculpting, molding, cutting out, painting, and you can create 3D models in there and then export them as a 3D model object or as a video clip of the 3D model that you've made, or as an image. And I've sold one of these as NFT. Like there's so many possibilities of creating stuff in VR and having a different kind of output. Something that's really fun is the VR painting software. You can get messy with paint and it really feels like you're painting because you've got the canvas there and the brush kind of gently stops there, so you can kind of play around with the bristles and paint or just throw a whole bucket of paint over it. It's pretty fun. So you can make all kinds of art in VR using painting tools, which feels a bit more traditional. You can use 3D sculpting tools, which is pretty mind-blowing when you kind of get the hand of playing around with them. Or even softwares like Google Tilt Brush, which I've seen little kids jump on there and they're playing in there straight away and they're drawing and there was a little girl I saw at a workshop and she just created this pink princess environment, like pink everything, like sparkles and like pink buildings. Google Tilt Brush is a really fun entry-level art creation tool in VR. And then you can obviously export as image or a video to share or to post, or you can use this content to create music videos. You can use it to create, background wallpapers for YouTube. Who knows? Then when we're talking about 3D model design and creation, what about taking that 3D model that you've developed and then maybe tweaking a bit or using it for 3D printing? And when we talk about 3D printing, we need 3D models for the printing software. So what about a made in VR model, which is kind of feels a bit more handmade than perhaps tweaking and clicking around on the 3D modeling software? And then you could create maybe a piece of 3D printed jewelry or a character. So I class that as made in VR. And then other made in VR workflows could be you draw something in Google Tilt Brush, you take a snapshot image of that, and then maybe you print that on a t-shirt. So I'd still class that as made in VR, but then you've got more of a physical object as the output. So mixing up media is really fun. I made this postcard in Quill. So hand-drawn, illustrated, animated, and then using an AR app, you can actually look through your phone and this will come to life. So there's different ways that you can mix up the media using VR as a tool, a design tool to create all different kinds of artworks. When we talk about VR as a design tool, there's a whole other realm of design there, so such as user experience design or architecture or interior design. Something else I'd like to add about VR as a design tool is the idea of prototyping. So you can use softwares to create how an augmented reality app would function in the space, or thinking about, you could design a floor plan of an exhibition and then stand in the space and then maybe see, so-and-so's big sign is kind of blocked by this pillar here. Good thing I can kind of visualize that and see that in the space. Seeing how something is laid out in a virtual space rather than on a 2D flat image. And then, as I mentioned before, the interior design, so creating a space, maybe switching up the style of the couch, switch, or you can switch the color of the rooms or the styling or the size or the layout or anything else that you do in interior design, and then playing around with maybe the view from the window or the light coming through, or maybe different kinds of lights and how that affects the coloring in the space. So the idea for designers using a virtual reality 360 environment to create stuff that is meant for a 3D environment just feels really right and makes a lot of sense to be able to see things in 3D that are going to end up being 3D. So I hope that uncovers a bit for you what virtual reality art is about and has perhaps inspired you to take a look or to carry on learning and helping me figure out what virtual reality art is, because it's such a new space. And also, you know, people were excited about virtual reality art so long ago, like what, in the 80s, with that Nintendo one that was just like red lines shooting at you. We've come a long way now. We have photorealistic, like hyper-real virtual reality experiences in gaming, and people are just getting started on creating these VR art experiences or using VR as an art and design tool in their toolkit. So it's such a very exciting time. I hope this has maybe inspired you a little bit. I'm pretty inspired and excited. Expired? I hope I'm not expired. I'm pretty excited about VR art, and I think it's just a wicked place for people to start collaborating in different creative fields. It's a pretty awe-inspiring way to create art or to experience art. So I hope this has covered your questions of what virtual reality art is. And thank you for watching this video to the end. You can follow me on Instagram, it's just Claire Abdullah. And as usual, if you enjoy anyone's content on YouTube, give them a like and a subscribe, because it really helps them to promote to other users and get more followers and watchers and viewers and all that good stuff. So thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you soon. Bye for now.